A brand new video on the topic of the blue marble, or well, our Earth. We're gonna talk about climate change, what to do about climate change, and about Earth Day, since today is the 22nd of April after all. So, let's begin. So, first we're gonna talk about climate change. Now, I am sure all of you have probably heard of climate change, and maybe some of you don't think it's alarming, some of you think it's very important, some of you think it's irrelevant to you, or similar thoughts. But climate change is actually very relevant to your life, and if we don't do anything about climate change, well, it's not gonna end well. But you probably are wondering, how do we even know we have climate change? Am I just making stuff up? No, unfortunately, I'm not making stuff up. So, we know that there is climate change, but before we can talk about climate change, we need to address the difference between climate and weather. Because climate change isn't just a change of weather, it's a climate change. We gotta see why it's called climate change. So, what is the difference between climate and weather? Well, weather is the current state of the atmosphere, so sometimes it rains, sometimes it's sunny, sometimes there's a strong wind and there's a storm or tornado or hurricane or whatever weather you know of. And it changes daily because the atmosphere changes daily. And for most part of our history, it was unpredictable until, well, meteorologists came along. And now we have sensors, satellites, and meteorological stations that can predict the weather accurately. Although still some have some problems, at least we know if it will be sunny or a hurricane. Now, what is climate? Climate is much more different than weather. Climate has an equalized weather that does not really change much for an area. So a desert is a type of a climate. It's always hot, sunny, and it barely rains. So the weather is very, very stable. A forest is a type of climate, a jungle, taiga, tropical area, all of those have their own climates because their temperature, their weather is sort of averaged out on an area. So, how do we know about climate change? How do we know it exists? Well, what we can address to that question as well is, how do we know about climate change and why? What is exactly climate change? Well, climate change is the change of climates around Earth, so everything is becoming warmer. How do we know everything is becoming warmer? Well, scientists have tracked the temperature of Earth, well, the average temperature of Earth for the past 20 years, and it's rising. And the problem is that when temperatures rise, bad things tend to happen. As you can see on this graph, in the last couple of years, it has really been increasing by an average. So at first it was 0.5 and now it's about 1.25-ish. And it'll keep increasing and it'll have dire consequences for our planet. So, what caused climate change? I mean, it didn't just come out of thin air. Obviously, something had to cause it. And well, the sad part is humans cause climate change. And we'll explore the different things humans do that cause climate change. And the most important and the most famous of all of them are fossil fuels. So fossil fuels are natural gas, oil, and coal. Those are the materials that are leftovers from ancient beings such as trees. Well, coal is essentially dead remnants of trees, from fossils, from animals, and when you burn coal or oil or natural gas, it produces a lot of CO2, which blocks heat from it returning to space. It kind of like piles up in the atmosphere and creates a greenhouse effect. Do you know how every time you enter a greenhouse, it always seems warmer than it is on the outside? Well, they're built for that reason, so that plants in the winter can keep warm and stay alive. But if the greenhouse effect goes wild, as it did on Venus, it could cause the whole planet to become a volcanic mass of land, and that is not good. Also, another factor in climate change is deforestation. So, trees are our best friend in the fight against climate change because they suck up CO2, use sunlight and their chlorophylls in their cells to produce oxygen and food for themselves. So they basically eat CO2 to stay alive, and they create oxygen, which is a very good gas. Well, it keeps us alive. If there were no trees on Earth, well, we would all die. So it's very, very sad to see deforestation happening all around Earth, and the world's biggest jungles are turning into mild forests. And the less trees we have, the less carbon they can suck up and, well, make it kind of disappear from the atmosphere. Although if we didn't deforest, it wouldn't be enough to stop the effects of fossil fuels. So, what are the consequences of climate change? What is so bad about it? You're probably thinking it's nothing major, but trust me on this one, it really is. So we have melting ice caps. Now this might not seem very important at the moment, but it is actually very, very important because due to the increase in temperature, the polar ice is melting faster and faster. And a lot of animals they depend on ice caps. They depend on ice forming, and the more it melts, they become endangered, and they cannot continue their biological processes without their environment being stable. So they go extinct or they die off massively, and things are really bad. Plus, a lot of that ice has trapped CO2 in it. The good thing about ice is that it traps things inside it. So even as the ice melts, all the gases, everything that went into the ice is getting released, which is also very bad. So what I mentioned earlier is also affecting our oceans and wildlife. Not just the increase in temperature, but because all that ice is melting, we have rise in sea level. We'll talk about that a little later. Let's first address the increase in temperature that causes death in the oceans. So the oceans basically absorb almost all of the heat from the atmosphere, which makes the oceans warmer, which you would think is a good thing, but it's not, because it makes the waters more acidic. Well, when you taste water, it's not acidic, but for animals, it's very, very dangerous. And it kills coral reefs, which is very, very sad. It bleaches them. And a lot of marine ecosystems are being destroyed because species are not adapted to these kinds of environments and cannot adapt fast enough to save themselves. Also, obviously, what you might think, with the increase in temperature comes climate change, because everything is getting warmer, climates get warmer, deserts get hotter, jungles get hotter, forests get hotter. But that's not the part that's really dangerous. The most dangerous part is in tundras and in icy places where it gets warmer. Species there are not adapted to warmer weather, and then they die off, and that's not very good. And this is something that natural disasters, they affect humans in very, very bad ways. Like take Hurricane Katrina, very, very big disaster. And if we continue with climate change, more of Katrinas will come, and it'll cost a lot of money for repairs, and it will just kill so many people, and it's just not worth it. We should rather stop climate change than thinking that it'll go away, when it will just get worse and worse. So due to the increase in temperature, we have more frequent floods, droughts, fires. For example, the fires in Australia last year, and other natural disasters as tornadoes, earthquakes, and hurricanes, especially tornadoes and hurricanes. And as I mentioned earlier, with the ice caps melting and sea level rising, all of the islands, some small islands, get flooded entirely. They disappear underwater, and some large coastal cities are getting floods, which is not good, and it's just taking human lives. So, how much CO2 do we emit every year? Like the entire Earth? Then the answer is very sad, and it's a really large number. We emit 36 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere every year. And our master plan is to get to zero emissions very soon, which you might think is impossible and we should just give up on it, but no. Even though it sounds impossible, it does. We should never give up on our own planet, and people can really work together and create marvelous solutions for deep and complicated problems such as these. So I have every confidence that we will find a way to get to zero emissions soon. But in the meantime, how do we stop climate change? Like, how do we make it slow down or stop? It's becoming a serious problem for us already. We should take action. And, well, everybody needs to work together in order to stop climate change. We need to address the world and make sure that everybody knows about climate change before we start taking action. Because to take action, we need collaboration between people, between cities, countries. The entire world needs to be globally interconnected and all on the same page in order for us to fight climate change. But in the short term, we don't have that solution yet. So we need to focus on ourselves and our small societies with which we can contain ourselves with. So we need to sort of connect individually and collaborate to stop climate change. So what can you do? Some very simple habits that you can do every day which will help in the fight against climate change are: save electricity at home by turning off the lights regularly. When you leave the room, just turn off the light. I personally forget sometimes, but it's always good to remind yourself about Earth, and I'm sure you'll remember to turn off the lights. Don't use too much, and if you don't need a light, don't use it. If none of your digital devices are charging, turn off the charger. You might think, well, I'm not charging anything, why would I have to? Well, it turns out that chargers actually suck electricity even though nothing is charging, so you're wasting precious energy. You're wasting electricity on nothing, just the charger getting charged with electricity, so it's useless. And you should not have chargers in your outlets unless you're not using them. Also, if you have old clothes, don't throw them away. The clothes industry has a very heavy carbon footprint, and if you're buying clothes, don't throw them away. Give them to other people who need them. If you can't give it to anybody, you can make it into rags, you can clean it, you can make DIY new stuff, you can make a bag out of your old jeans. It's very creative, and you can do a lot of things with old clothes. Also, if you see an animal in need, save it. If you see a bee laying on the ground, or a butterfly, or insect, or a deer, or any animal, really, you should save it because we need as many species as possible. And if you can, it's always just goodwill to help other people or animals in need. Very important, recycle plastic, paper, glass, and batteries. Recycle everything you can. But, side note, you cannot recycle all plastics. So every plastic has a number on it, 01, 02, 03, and so on. But most of those numbers are not recyclable. Only number 1 and number 2 are the most common, and most facilities have them for recycling. But people just throw everything they have from plastic into the recycling bin, and most of it just ends up at landfills again. So you have to be very careful about what you recycle, and make sure to recycle it carefully, not carelessly. And other than your simple habits, which you can do, here are more challenging projects you can embark on. These are not really challenging, but they require a little more effort than some simple habits you can do from day to day. You can organize a cleaning day with your friends and or family. Clean up a park or backyard, public space. You can clean the waters, well, the ocean or the sea if you live on the coast. And if you own a farm, or if you're doing farming at home, like crops and vegetables are crops, and fruit or anything like that, do not use a monocultural farm, because this is also for your plant safety. With climate change, we're gonna have food shortages, and it's important to make the most of food while we still have it, and while climate change has not escalated drastically. So I recommend farming not monocultural farms. For example, a monocultural farm means that you have, for example, an entire field just filled with corn, with no other plant but corn. And this is very dangerous because if one tiny little virus forms that infects corn, it will infect the entire field because all the plants are very closely packed together. They're all the same species, so it can affect everything, and you lose a lot of crops, which might be very important to you if you're a farmer. So don't really do that. And I did not note in the presentation, but use GMOs. They might not sound very enticing, but GMOs won't hurt you. You eat probably GMOs every day and you don't even notice it. So it doesn't mean that they combined frog and tomato genes, but they just modified the plant slightly so that farmers don't have to use so many pesticides, or they don't have to put in so many chemicals into the earth. They save the environment by doing that. Advocate for clean energy sources. If your town is mostly based on coal and fossil fuels, you should advocate for clean energy sources like solar, wind, water, especially if you live in a city near a giant waterfall, or in a very, very sunny area, or a very, very windy area. You should advocate for clean energy sources. And one of the most important parts is educate others about climate change, because maybe you don't have an idea how to save the world, but somebody else might. They just need a little push. So if you can, educate others about climate change. And to address our last topic of the day, we have Earth Day, of course. Happy Earth Day, everyone. Since today it's Earth Day, and I thought that it would be very nice if we could celebrate. Earth Day is a day where we honor our Earth, our home planet. And we take care of the Earth more than usual, although we should take care of the Earth all the time. But we care for it the most on Earth Day. And it was a day where we remember our lovely planet and that we should really take care of it. So, what should you do for Earth this year? Even though we do have our COVID-19 pandemic and it's been very stressful, we cannot give up on Earth Day. So if you can, organize a cleaning day, go outside, and if you cannot be outside, wear masks, be safe. And it doesn't have to be live. You can have a online Earth Day where you educate others, or you host a webinar, or you do something for Earth today. If nothing else, just go outside and plant something, or tend to your garden, or take a walk in the park and clean a bit of trash on the way. But do something, at least a little bit, to help Earth. And the last point for today I would like to make is that even though we have Earth Day, it's not enough to just take care of Earth really well on Earth Day. That's why I am launching the Green Spring event. Yay! This event will last from today, the 22nd of April, till the 21st of June, which is the summer solstice. That's when officially summer begins and spring ends. So this would be a green spring where we would really focus on climate change on our dear and beloved Earth. And I will post some interesting posts and activities and some projects you can embark on that will just help you and promote your knowledge for Earth. We'll talk about saving electricity, about where it comes from, where our energy comes from. Is nuclear energy really that bad? And we will talk about our ecosystems and why it's important for tree deforestation to not happen. We'll talk about marine life and all sorts of things. Of course, I will have activities where you can do things like I'll teach you how to plant a plant or flower or vegetable or whatever crop you really want. And we will try and save electricity, save water, save energy, basically any energy. So if you want to participate in these projects, of course you can. And please, if you're kind enough, if you participated in a project, please let me know that you did it. I would really love to see what you guys did. And if you have any suggestions for an activity, project, post, anything, let me know. All the links to everything will be down in the description. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you in another video. Bye bye.